an office from Portugal, from Porto, also really young, also very promising. And if last time we finished with a small observation on education, let's say so, Felipe and Ana Luisa Suarez, they studied in Porto, but also in Ljubljana in Tokyo. So all our guests have very colorful patterns of both education and professional experience. With two theses, like really going up in the ideas term. And I would like to invite them on stage. They also have a third partner. I'm not going to try to badly pronounce your names, so I will ask you to tell the audience your own name. Thank you very much.
Okay, hello, good night everyone. So my name is Ana Luisa, and this is Filipe, so it was quite close. And we are FALA atelier from Portugal, a young practice that we have been working together for almost 4 years. But we are going to show some of our projects, but before, I think it's important to talk a little bit about our path through the last years. Because depending on how all the experiences you have in your life, they will determine how your work is and how do you work. And this applies to our case, and I think it also applies to all architects. If you manage to actually understand what is behind your work or behind your past, you can understand the present. And in our case, we could start talking about where we grew up and where we studied, but I think it's more important to talk about our architecture path. So we both study in Porto faculty, which gave us a really nice but really strict point of view relating to architecture. But it gave us the basis of everything that we actually do right now. Then we also went to Switzerland, where we worked and where we traveled, and it was a continuation more or less of the same way of work, but more strict. And it was our first contact with the actual reality. So where you actually, the works that you produce, they will be built, and it's not just theoretical projects. And 1 year later, we went to the opposite of Switzerland, which was Japan. And it's not only about the way of working, how they think, but it's also about the culture. And when you live there for some time, you start understanding how they think and the differences between Europe and Japan. And we also took the time to visit some countries around once we were in the other side of the world, where we could also have more contact with completely opposite cultures, because even though Japan is quite different, even the way they think, it's probably the city closer to Europe of the whole Asia. So it was also interesting to visit all these countries around. And all these things, they are part of ourselves. So all these experiences, all these works that we did, all the offices where we worked, and at some point we also wrote our thesis that are related with this way of producing architecture. And it was a point where we could stop and think and rethink everything that we lived, and everything that we thought it was important for architecture. And during all this process, or all this path, we were working, doing projects besides the projects that we were doing in the offices where we were working. And we started, as I said, 4 years ago, more or less. And all these projects starting to turn us into an office that is not fixed. But at some point we got a lot of work, so we decided to stop, and we are now based in Porto, our hometown, and we are starting to have more collaborators. And in the last year, so our team is quite flexible. We are the core mainly, but then we are working with a Swiss partner. And also other collaborators that don't stay long, because right now the work that we have is not fixed, but which creates a really interesting way of working, because each person that comes brings a new input to our way of thinking, to our way of producing, and even after even if they leave. They will leave something that we will for sure use in the future, even if we don't think about it. And right now our work can be divided into main parts, 2 routes that sometimes cross, one which is small commissions, mainly in Portugal, small built works, and the other one that are the competitions, where we take more time, and where we develop different scales of projects. So in this one is a renovation that we just finished last month in Lisbon. It's a small apartment in Lisbon that we didn't have a lot to do when you see the building. So it was a small space, but the main part of the main thing of that apartment was the view. It had an amazing view towards all the city of Lisbon. So we took this idea, and this is the original plan of the apartment, and we decided just to demolish everything and flip the idea of the apartment that had the living room facing the street and small rooms facing the view. So we demolished everything and we just flipped the apartment. We built 2 bedrooms and an open space that could actually allow the people that live there all have access to this amazing view, and creating a space all the way through. So we started demolitions. As you can see, this is the living area where before there was 2 rooms, a kitchen, an entrance hall, and we just demolished everything. We demolished the balcony wall, and then we also, in the back part, we built where it was the living room, we divided and we built the 2 bedrooms. So it was a really simple project. It was all about the small details, because there's not a lot of things to do. But it was an interesting project, because we not only did the architecture part, we also ended up designing furniture for the apartment. Not all of them, but some pieces, which allowed us to create a continuous and more current space. And one of the things was also the doors, that we kept them with glass, that if we open all the doors from all the apartment, it would be possible to see all the way through. And this is the balcony that is closed and that has access to the toilet. And even during night, the view is still quite amazing, and you can see everything. And then on the other hand, we do, so this was a small commission, and then we also do big competitions. This one was a library also near Lisbon, in a place where before there was a nice garden, but right now it's just an empty space, not used, with not nice, there's nothing interesting actually around. And a public library is quite an important program. So when we started to develop the project, we couldn't build here, so in the end we were forced somehow to go to the corner. So instead of trying to create relations with the surroundings, we just decided not to have any kind of relation with the surroundings, creating a building with a circular plan that would be an object in itself. And having this abstract idea placed in this garden that we wanted to create. So it's a library, so you don't need a lot of light, or you don't need to have views to the outside, and especially it was not a nice outside. So the openings are quite small and specific to each area, but we designed everything with geometries, and we had references for this library, like the Asplund library, and then the Pantheon idea. So for the library, we wanted to create this kind of space, where you would have all the books around you and then just a nice skylight. So on the first two floors is just more technical things, and on the last floor is where you have the main space. So this is the entrance with the archives and auditorium, kids area, and then on the last floor the main space. And this is just an image of the interiors spaces, not the divided ones. And this was the idea that we wanted to have on the outside, where we also created a small garden, and this piece would stand by itself, having meaning for itself. Then this other project, it's again the opposite. It's a really, really small bar, a small pavilion, but the main idea was to have light. And then we created just a kind of mesh that would disguise the structure. So the interior is quite simple, just a DJ area and a balcony. So it's quite important first to protect it from the rain and protect it from all the people, because this was a night event. So we had several layers, but in the end what you get is this several layers of meshes. And then, so the main idea was to, from far you would see a spotlight. When you would come closer you would see a shape, a different shape. And then if you come even closer you will see the texture of it. That would at the same time have make the shape and also protect the pavilion. And once we made the pavilion higher than all the, so this was a 3x3x5 pavilion, which allowed us, when it was full of people, it would still be quite visible, so it worked as a meeting point during the whole time of the event. And then again, another competition. All these projects that I'm talking right now were made in Portugal, and this one, the first two were near Lisbon, these two are near Porto, and this one was a sport hall of the University of Porto that was located in between highways and has been not completely abandoned, but it's not well preserved at all. So it was a competition to renew it and to extend the sports fields that they provided. So the main point of this whole project was to have a garden, because it had really nice trees, really nice species, but at the same time creating a wall in these gardens. So this is the final project, where you would have the spaces in between, with paths and with trees and with a lot of plants, and then these enclosed walls where the sports would happen, and creating this duality between interior and exterior, and at the same time allowing this space to be used not only by the practical point of view of sports, but also has a nice space just to go and to have a walk around the area, and at the same time the people playing wouldn't be disturbed by the outsiders. So this was the original plan. The first phase was just to renew the existing sports fields, and to do that we also created a wall all around the site that would protect the site from the noise coming from the highway. And then the second phase would be to build more fields and extend the main pavilion. So this was the idea: having a wall, having a garden as background, and creating this duality once again. So having the spots from the inside, and then having this garden outside that could be used in different ways, even for runners. And all these walls had an acoustic reason. So the site had a weird shape, but we tried to give it a grid in the back, defining clear routes. It was not a flat terrain, so we also had to work with the different heights of the site. Then we had to demolish some trees, but we planted more trees, so the acoustic, it would work as also as an acoustic barrier from the outside, adding to the wall. We also worked with the landscape architect to create these moments around these paths with different species of plants. We also work with an engineer for the water connections and the collectors of water and the lighting system. So it seems a quite simple project, but it demanded a lot of managing to make everything work as one. And these are the entrances and the different paths that you can have in the building. And if we could resume the whole project, it would be an image like this. And this is the exterior view from the one side of the highway, where you would just have a wall.
Images. This is what we do on a daily basis. As Anna said, we have been working together for about 4 years, although the office in the most formal way started about 1 year and a half ago, more or less, of course with some ups and downs. But this is what we have been doing. What we have been doing in Japan, in Switzerland, in Portugal since we were born. And what usually happens is that I bring my own images, and images in this sense it's a metaphor. Anna brings her own images, and now in the last few months, since we started collaborating with more people, everyone brings something. And at some point, and I really like this image because at some point this is how our heads, how our work table stands, and it's very confusing to work like this. So Anna presented 4 projects that, well, they are the product of this process. But what we are trying to do now, and because the theme of tonight is the present, is somehow to create hierarchy, to create an order, to create a system that we can base our work in. Because at some point you have so many images that you need to define some sort of perimeter. What stays in, what stays out, what defines the perimeter, and this is somehow what we have been doing, kind of in a parallel to competitions and commissions, because we are somehow questioning, because we are a very young office. I mean, Anna is 25, I'm 27, and in the last year and a half we did almost 30 projects. This is just crazy, and we worked with almost 10 people for short periods of time. We worked in other offices. I mean, it's this idea of connection. It's everywhere, and at some point we even collaborated with an artist for this intervention, and we need to define. I would not like to call it an agenda, and I mean every office should do it. Every architect, not only every architect, every person should have a clear idea of what he or she stands for, and we have so many references right now. I think we are somehow an example of a young officer with too many images on their minds, that we need to understand what we really want to keep. Which references, which images, which architects, which ideas we want to fight for, and even more important, we need to understand what we don't want, what we don't want to be, what we don't want to do, and have a very clear understanding of where we stand. And being a young architecture office these days is somehow this. Because, I mean, we are giving a lecture in Romania. 1 year ago, this would be impossible to think about. And this image says what we are. I mean, we have a small build portfolio, small scale interventions. We have a huge amount of competitions, but and we have a website, of course. But when you go to the website, this is what you see. You go on the main street, you see this facade, and it somehow sells an idea of something. But we want to go deeper than that. We want to go from the image of the chair to the chair itself, and so talking about the present and talking about who we are now, about what we stand for, is somehow this transition between the image and the description to the actual object. So producing these images, and 90% of the projects we did up to date, they are resumed in images, text, links, relations, booklets. But as architects, we need to give the step forward. We need to build the chair itself. And now I'm going to present the final 4 projects that somehow they make a kind of a counterpoint to the first 4. This is a competition for a primary school in Switzerland, in a small village on the French side. And this is the site here, this rectangle. And you see, you can understand the scale of the buildings around. And the site was quite generous. And if we would build the whole school in one level, it would take half of the site. So, and the school was already quite big. So we got this problem that we had too much land to build just a school. So we started thinking on how to deal with it, because we didn't like the idea of just leaving, you build a building on one point and you leave the rest of the site somehow abandoned. Even with a nice landscape, it's still not controlled. So we thought about this idea of using some sort of contract, some sort of duality. On the one hand, you would have this wood structure. It would be comfortable, it would have a rhythm, it would be kind of structuring the whole school on the inside. On the other hand, you would have a wall, and this wall would be the public face, the public identity of the school on the outside. And when the two of them come together, you would create a series of unbalanced relations. So this is the footprint of the school. The offset is determined by local laws. And this is what you see when you access the building. You get the impression that the school works as a one thing, because the playground is also part of the school, so it somehow becomes a part of the building, and the fact that the facade just goes around gives it a sort of neutrality towards the surroundings. And when you go inside, you have a very simple diagram organizing the whole program. You have classrooms, you have a corridor, you have playground. And since we were also asked to do a covered playground, but building something in the middle of the playground with a roof seemed a little bit strange, so the covered playground becomes the corridor. That somehow is super extended. I think it was 4 meters, if I'm not wrong. And it becomes an in-between zone. It's neither school, it's neither playground. So this is the facade, the school, the classrooms, the circulation, and the playground. And when you are inside the playground for the first time, you understand that this wall is just a limit of the school itself. So from the outside you don't understand it, from the inside you can see the city happening behind you. And to reinforce this contrast, so actually both structures are independent. You could have just a wall or you could have just a school. But the two of them come together, and the contrast is even bigger inside the classrooms, so that everything is actually made out of wood. So plywood elements and the wood structure. This is another competition, also in a village close to Geneva, and this picture says a lot, because this house in the middle with that garden around was a site. And you can see that it got kind of lost. Time has passed, the city has expanded, and somehow that small barn stayed. And it's actually really a barn, but with time, several people started using it. They started moving in, bringing a lot of furniture, building slabs, building walls, building stairs, and the municipality wanted to just get the building back and transform it into a social center. So the building in itself was not a masterpiece, but it had qualities. It had some sort of structure on the inside that made it actually quite interesting, and it was just filled with noise. So the first thing we decided to do was to take all the noise away, and only on the south side, so on this side, that we could not keep the wood structure. We would make an extension, but using exactly the same volume, exactly the same approach. And the main gesture was, while cleaning all these walls, defining the circulation. So knowing that we would have the main access on this point and close to the garden, you would have a staircase on the side together with the bathrooms, and on every level you would have exactly the same opening in the middle of the wall, creating free levels, free spaces. But we were also asked to build an auditorium, and the auditorium didn't fit. So we built some sort of evil twin of the first building. So this is the complex. The first thing while placing the auditorium was to define a clear facade, a clear entrance, where is the door? And these two buildings together, they just define a corner point where that becomes quite clear. The second was, while putting this second building on that position, you would define, as I said, the public facade and a private garden on the back that would not see the street. And then the geometries of the buildings, because there was also a small greenhouse on the corner, the geometries of the buildings are quite strict, quite rigid, but the landscape and the new trees and the old trees, they just define a kind of generous landscape around it. And finally, we decided, in the same way that we did with the building, the first one, we decided to go to the site and remove all the walls around it, all the fences, because you had fence on one side but not on the other, and just solve the problem of the landscape by making it continuous and without any boundaries, any walls behind it. So it would become a completely social center, completely open to the city, with nothing separating the city from it. This is the complex. And somehow the second building tries to mimic the first one. So it has a sloped roof, but it's not the same, and it has a concrete structure on the outside, painted in white, although the first one is just plastered. It has a central axis, but 90 degrees relatively to the first one. And somehow they, that's why I called it an evil twin. They come together, they make sense together, but they are opposites. But the idea was that, not opposites, they are complementary. But the idea was also related with this understanding that the new one could not be a mimetic of the old one. It should somehow make sense, and if you would look at the complex, you would understand that they come together, but you also need to understand that they are two different buildings built in different periods. So, auditorium on the right, social center on the bottom. And on the last floor of the social center, there would be some sort of working areas for the citizens. And this was what we were talking about this main entrance, the two axes, and the circulation defining the whole inner structure of the buildings. So this would be how the social center would look on the inside, with this succession of white rooms, like a white canvas, because the social center is an undefined program. You don't really know what is going to happen. And then the auditorium, it was a small auditorium, but still too big for the old building, where you would have the main axis, entrance, stage, and then 90 degrees, a secondary axis with two windows. So from the street you could look inside the auditorium and into the garden. And this was what I was talking before about the construction. They are quite similar, but at the same time not the same. And anticlimax. As Anna said, we were living in Japan for 1 year, and probably the best year of our lives so far. And we were lucky enough to live in this building. It's an Akagin capsule tower from Kurokawa, built in 1972. And actually, we were lucky because we just went there to take some pictures, as every tourist does in Japan, but every architecture tourist, I mean, of course. But we ended up living there because we were also looking for a room, and we asked some questions, and 2 weeks later we were living in this one. And this was an amazing opportunity in several ways. It was amazing because we could actually, living in one of these buildings that you usually only see on the books and on the internet. And at the same time, we took the opportunity to take this experience a little bit further. So we interviewed all the residents. This is Kanzo, the most amazing person. Sorry. We had the opportunity to talk with them, to ask them questions, to understand why were they there. And we found out a very ambiguous reality about the Nakagin, that Kurokawa based this text about the nomad on this idea that everyone would live alone, and today the building only stands because inside each individual cell went someone that actually loves the building so much that they defined a 20-25 people community that fights for the building. So these individuals became some sort of collective that is fighting for a building that was completely against the idea of a collective. So it's subversive, but at the same time fascinating. And as I said, we had the opportunity to share one capsule, well, this is actually how it was on a daily basis, so it's okay. And last year, 1 year more or less, the Lisbon Architecture Triennale invited us to do an exhibition, because we wrote some texts and we somehow we took the study a little bit further, and then we were offered to do the exhibition in this space. Actually, these were 2 rooms, and there was something strange about them, because they were very nice rooms in an amazing building, but they just didn't fit the contents. And any idea about just putting the contents on the walls, exhibiting the Nakagin in this room would be somehow doomed to failure. So we decided to bring not only the contents, not only the pictures and the texts, but some of the ideas behind the project itself, behind the 1972 original project. So we brought an independent structure that would stand on its own, and we hanged the contents that were all in the same format, all in the same organization, but completely different from each other, on random, not so random because there was a lot of work to choose them, but in a kind of random way. And each one of these represents one of the rooms. And then we would let the people walk freely between them. And so this contrast, this structure inside the old room was somehow like the new building on the top of the old city, and this format for the panels was somehow the format of the capsules. The repetition, the scale was, these ideas were somehow already inside our heads even before we started. And one room was white and cold, so pictured from the outside. The other room was yellowish and more warm, so pictured from the inside. And at the same time, the module used by scaffolding have lots of different standard sizes, and we used the size that with 6 modules you would have the space of a capsule. One module was actually the size of a bathroom, and so basically you could not only understand the contents through the panels, through the text, through this contrast, you could also understand the sense of scale and repetition of the building. And of course, during the guided tours, no one believed that you could have a bathroom inside such a small space, but trust me, you can. And in the end of the route, because you would need to go back again, you could not go out on the other side, you would have our capsule, so somehow it starts on the outside of the experience and it finishes in the most personal part of it. And this is the final project. You can imagine that if you live 1 year in 8 square meters, it kind of messes up with our head. And when we got back to Portugal, right when we were leaving the Nakagin, there was this public competition for a social housing neighborhood with 54 plots, each plot with 10 houses, each house for X amount of people, so you could imagine the huge numbers. And we never did at the time such a big project, so we were trying to understand exactly, one of those moments where you need to understand where you put yourself regarding not only the architecture, but the social side of the project and the manifesto behind it. And the fact that the jury or the brief divided the site into 54 exactly the same plots, and they were demanding for a standardization and repetition of the same module over and over, kind of messed up with our feelings about the project, because it was somehow the first step to failure. But we could not run away from that, so we tried to understand how to work inside these rules, how to work inside this limitation in a way, by understanding it. So if the point was about standardization, we gave a few steps back. So instead of thinking about the plot as the standard element, we thought about this unit, this pixel, as the basic element for everything. And with this pixel, you could design, according to all Portuguese regulations, efficiency, standards, accessibility, etc., the most efficient bathroom and the most efficient kitchen. With 2 modules, you could define a bedroom. With 4 modules, a living area. Sorry. And if you would repeat these elements endlessly, you could almost define an entire city. But that was not the point. And then we brought the engineer in, and we discussed about how to do a structure that could be 100% reusable afterwards, that could be flexible enough to accommodate any kind of change. And the engineer came up with this good idea about the basis being out of concrete, but then this metal, prefabricated metal structure And then we had to define, we used stove and tech systems, and we had to define how to do the typical wall on the inside and the typical wall on the outside with the same thickness in the same system, so that you could have always basically the same wall everywhere. And at some point we got lost, because with such a standard approach, you could just become a sculpture. And this was wrong. So again, a few steps back, and we thought that the social side is important, because you bring, it is a social neighborhood filled with, I think at the time, 600 people in an estimate, so 6,000 people. So as an estimate, you cannot imagine that the same house is going to fulfill the needs of 6,000 different people. So the idea would be, for each plot, the people that would live there would come to the discussions, to the public workshops, and discuss exactly how they wanted to live. Because we as architects would define some sort of vocabulary, some sort of set of words, set of ideas, and then they would make the phrases. So we would define the construction, the rhetorics, the idea behind the project, and then everyone would be able to do their own space. And since we talked about images, we took only pictures of buildings that we had visited or we were about to visit, of our references, to do these collages. And what was funny about it was this idea that with just white walls and standard PVC windows, you could achieve an infinite amount of possibilities, and at the same time what would actually define the social side of it would be the people living in them. So not just, we should not design the homes, we should somehow provide a service. And in social housing, and in Portugal this is a very big theme, we should go deeper and deeper with this discussion. And on the ground floor you would get these remaining spaces that could be used for social activities, some sort of cultivated land. And of course, for the competition we needed to design, let's say, a typical plot. And of course, one of the main advantages was the typological variation that you could achieve. And these are just some examples, but the infinite variations you could try to develop. And this would be somehow the final result. A landscape with people. Everyone would get more. These people living there, they had their own houses, and the houses were going to be demolished. And each one of them had an X amount of square meters on the outside that they would lose if they would be placed in just a slab, in just a regular social housing building. So we tried to incorporate, once again with an amazing work from the engineer, this idea of bringing to every apartment the same amount of land they had before. But since we needed to build them on top of each other, of course this land would happen in the form of balconies, and on the ground floor in these common spaces. And as a social housing project, it was quite nice that we managed to do it in such a way that the access to each apartment is completely independent. So we would never cross a public stair or a public space that belongs to more than one people. So it's your space, so you take care of it. If it becomes common, somehow it creates problems, it creates the beginning of it might become a problem in the future. And this is the final image. Instead of giving 54 times a block that repeats itself, we try to give some sort of social urban landscape. And this is the final image. It's very difficult to find an image to finish a lecture, but the point is that we are, as I said, we are at a turning point. We are fighting a lot. As I said, it's very difficult to open an office in Portugal. There is this crisis. There is, clients don't want to pay, and the ones that pay don't want to pay almost anything. And some of them don't pay again. There is a lot of pressure on our side, because if we would just work abroad, we would have a stable life, and we are fighting for something else. But this idea of the present is somewhere where the past and the future come together, and we talked a lot about our past, about where we came from, but it's important to talk a little bit about the future. So if the past is defined by the images we've been collecting, the future is about the images that we want to propose. And we hope that we can propose some nice images for the future. Thank you.